Fujairah's harbor lights flicker against a black horizon, and out past the breakwater, oil tankers sit low in the water, waiting their turn. Somewhere in a control room, a duty officer watches a pressure gauge tick upward on a pipeline running underneath 370 kilometers of desert sand. That gauge, more than any missile battery, is the real prize in this story. Because if you've ever watched gas prices jump on a screen at your local station and wondered what's happening on the other side of the planet to cause it, this is that moment, playing out in real time along a stretch of coastline most people couldn't find on a map. It starts, as so much in this region does, with a strike that wasn't supposed to happen. Israeli aircraft had already leveled the Natanz nuclear facility with a level of precision that left Tehran humiliated and searching for a way to answer without starting a war it couldn't win outright. The answer Iran settled on was the Strait of Hormuz itself. Within days, the narrow channel that carries a massive share of the planet's oil trade had minefields laid across its shipping lanes like a stealth trap, while Revolutionary Guard spedboats swarmed the water in packs, daring merchant captains to test their luck. Overhead, Mohajer 6 reconnaissance drones drifted in slow circles, feeding a constant stream of imagery back to commanders plotting where to strike next. Oil prices didn't just rise, they spiked, and the sense that something bigger than a border skirmish was brewing spread through every trading floor on Earth. But Abu Dhabi had already built its way around the choke point. Buried beneath the sand, the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline moves millions of barrels a day straight to the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman, skipping the strait entirely. It's the Emirates' insurance policy, and everyone in Washington and Tehran knew exactly what it meant. The moment that pipeline ramped up to full capacity, an American carrier strike group slid into position in the eastern Gulf of Oman. A Ford-class carrier sat at the center of the formation, ringed by Arleigh Burke-class destroyers layering the sky with overlapping air defense coverage. Nobody in the fleet needed to guess what was coming. They just had to wait for Iran to throw the first punch. Tehran didn't try to blow the pipeline apart in one shot. Instead, they went after it the way a scorpion goes after prey, small strikes meant to bleed the system dry. Mobile launchers disguised as ordinary delivery trucks rolled into position and unleashed a swarm of Shahed 136 drones, flying low across the dunes to slip under Emirati radar coverage, aiming not at the pipe itself, but at the pumping stations and pressure valves that kept oil moving. At the same time, coastal batteries fired off a wave of decoy missiles meant to overload the defense network's processing capacity before the real threat even arrived. What met them was a layered shield built from equipment sourced from 3 different continents. Russian-made Pantsir S-1 systems on the ground worked alongside American and Norwegian NASAMS batteries, forming a crossfire net that could handle drones, helicopters, and cruise missiles alike. French-built Gowind-class corvettes patrolled the waters off Fujairah, and American MQ-9 Reaper drones circled the pipeline route like sentries who never blinked. When the Pantsir batteries opened up, they didn't fire single shots. They poured out thousands of rounds a minute, turning the sky above the pumping stations into a wall of shrapnel that most of the swarm never made it through. Frustrated, Tehran escalated. From cliffs along its own coastline, a barrage of Pave cruise missiles launched low and fast, aimed squarely at Fujairah port itself, the one target that could turn the entire pipeline into 370 kilometers of useless stell with nowhere to send its cargo. This is where the American hand in all of this became impossible to ignore. A Navy E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, orbiting high above the Gulf with a radar dish the size of a small room mounted on its back, picked up the heat signature of the Pave missiles the instant they cleared their launch rails. Washington didn't fire a single round. It fed the targeting data straight into the cockpits of Emirati Mirage 2009 fighters, jets flying with their own radars switched off, completely invisible to Iranian sensors, guided entirely by information they never had to generate themselves. The Mirages slipped in, launched Storm Shadow missiles, and wiped the Pave launch sites off the map before Tehran's operators even registered what had happened. For a few minutes, the Emirati pilots must have felt something close to relief, watching the glow of secondary explosions in their mirrors as they turned for home. That relief didn't last. Iran had planned for exactly this moment. Hidden under infrared-absorbing camouflage netting that had kept them completely dark to every sensor in the sky, a battery of Khordad 15 air defense systems had been sitting in total silence, waiting for the Mirages to expose their backs. The instant the formation turned to retreat, Khordad 15's radar snapped on, and every cockpit alarm in the Emirati flight lit up with a lock warning. Sayad 3 missiles came off the rails seconds later. One Mirage caught a blast close enough to shred its wing with shrapnel, and the tidy formation broke apart into a scramble, cut off from its escape route and staring down the very real possibility of being picked off one by one. That's the kind of moment that raises an honest question worth sitting with. How much of modern warfare comes down to who blinks first, and how much comes down to who simply has better eyes in the sky? Because what saved the Emirati pilots wasn't a faster jet or a bigger missile. It was the fact that the same Hawkeye watching the battlefield had already logged Cordad 15's exact position the moment its radar lit up. A flight of F-35 Charlie Lightning jets approaching from angles Iran's sensor network hadn't accounted for received those coordinates before the Iranian crews even finished processing the new threat on their own scopes. Without ever revealing themselves, the stealth fighters fired AGM-88 Gulf advanced anti-radiation guided missiles, weapons built to chase the exact electromagnetic signal a radar system gives off. The harder Cordad 15's operators tried to hold their lock, the faster the missiles closed in. Within moments, the batteries that had ambushed the Mirage formation were gone. The Americans didn't stop there. Arleigh Burke destroyers began launching Tomahawk cruise missiles in steady, rhythmic waves, striking IRGC command and control centers up and down the coast with the kind of precision that left Iranian commanders with no fixed positions left to defend. What remained of Tehran's air defense network had to scatter depth into the interior just to survive, trading any hope of holding ground for the simple chance to keep their equipment intact. They lost more than hardware in that retreat. They lost control of the entire tempo of the fight. If you ask what actually turned this battle, the honest answer isn't the stealth fighter or the French jet everyone assumes gets the credit. It's that Hawkeye circling quietly above it all. The aircraft itself measures roughly 17.6 meters long, with a wingspan of 24.6 meters, carrying a radar dome over 7 meters across mounted above the fuselage. Two Rolls-Royce turboprop engines, each putting out more than 5,000 horsepower, keep it airborne for hours at a stretch, watching the fleet's surroundings from hundreds of kilometers out. Its radar operates in a frequency band that cuts through electronic jamming far better than the shorter wavelengths used by conventional fire control systems, which is exactly why it caught Cordad 15's signal the instant it switched on. But the real advantage isn't the radar by itself, it's the network. That same targeting picture gets shared, almost instantly, with every fighter, every destroyer, every friendly asset plugged into the system, which is how a French jet with its radar off and a stealth fighter approaching blind both ended up with exact coordinates on a target neither of them ever had to search for on their own. Step back from the individual engagements and the bigger picture gets uncomfortable fast. The Emirates built the Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline specifically to avoid depending on the Strait of Hormuz, and it works. Right up until you realize a fixed pipeline running hundreds of kilometers across open desert gives an enemy dozens of potential targets to choose from. Every pumping station and valve a possible pressure point. Defending all of it around the clock costs a fortune, and if this kind of fight ever broke out for real, nobody believes it would stay confined to one pipeline or one strait. Ports, refineries, command centers across the entire Gulf would likely end up on the target list, and the shock to global energy markets would reach far past the region itself, into every economy that runs on oil it doesn't produce domestically. The lesson underneath all of it isn't really about drones or missiles. Iran has plenty of both, and modern ones at that. It's about the gap between having weapons and having the ability to see, decide, and strike faster than your opponent can react. In this fight, the side that won wasn't the side with more firepower. It was the side that connected every sensor and every shooter into a single picture and closed the decision loop in seconds instead of minutes. That's the direction warfare is heading, whether people are comfortable with it or not. And it raises a question that doesn't have a clean answer. Does a smaller nation like the Emirates ever really have full control over its own defense when the decisive edge belongs to whoever owns the network watching over it? Or is that simply the price of security in a region this volatile? Something to think about the next time a headline about the Strait of Hormuz shows up next to the number on a gas pump.